The xenoanthropology lecture droned on, a familiar hum of alien syllables that Princess Kailani of the Viridian throne had heard 1,000 times. But today, her focus was not on the professor. It was on the human boy sitting beside her, Leo. He was the only human in the advanced class, a fact that had initially made him an object of curiosity, even suspicion, for the other galactic nobles. For Kailani, he had become something else entirely. He was sketching in his datapad, not taking notes. She stole a glance. It was a drawing of the classroom, but not as it was. In his picture, the sleek metallic desks were gnarled wood. The holographic displays were flickering candles, and the students were all dressed in strange, flowing clothes. He called it a fantasy, a genre from his home world. He was always sharing pieces of Earth, a planet she had only ever studied in texts. His people were deemed fascinatingly primitive by the Council, their technology a patchwork of genius and folly. But Leo was different. He spoke with a passion for his world's old stories, its myths of heroes and monsters, its art and its chaotic history. He wasn't just another student. He was a living, breathing piece of a world everyone else dismissed. A soft sigh escaped her. He looked up, his brown eyes meeting her luminous green ones. A smile touched his lips, a simple, uncomplicated human gesture. In that moment, the entire universe of political alliances and interstellar diplomacy fell away. There was just him. And she felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling she had no name for in her own language. It was terrifying and wonderful. She realized with a sudden, startling clarity that what she felt was not curiosity or friendship. It was love. The silence between them was not empty. It was a heavy living thing. Lyra's heart, the organ she prided herself on controlling, beat a fraction faster. Her guards were a discreet distance away, deeming this close proximity acceptable, non-threatening. They did not understand. All her academic knowledge of humans, all their charts on vocal ranges and cultural taboos, offered no protocol for this. For the simple, terrifying fact of one of them choosing to share her space, she could feel the minute vibrations of his breathing through the polished stone. He made no move to speak, to stare, to do any of the predictable things her texts had prepared her for. He simply sat, his gaze still fixed on the distant swirl of cosmic dust. She stole a glance. His face was weathered, carrying lines that spoke of suns different from her own. His hands, resting on his knees, were large and bore the faint traces of old scars. These were not the hands of a diplomat. The silence stretched for an eternity of seconds. Lyra's mind raced, cycling through possibilities. Was this a test? A form of primitive dominance display? Her own culture prized stillness, but this was different. This was a wall of calm, so complete it felt like a force. Finally, he turned his head. His eyes, a startling and simple blue, met hers. There was no aggression in them, no crude curiosity. There was just a quiet acknowledgement, as if he were noting the weather. He gave a single, slow nod. Then he looked away, back at the stars. In that 1 second of eye contact, Lyra felt not threatened, but seen. It was a feeling far more profound and far more frightening. A shrill, keening alarm shattered the vestibule's peace. A sound of pure Xylosian emergency. The obsidian floor trembled. Through the viewport, a swarm of tiny, darting ships emerged from behind a nearby moon. Their hulls the color of dried blood. Raiders, the GL, ancient enemies of Xylos. Lyra's blood ran cold. The palace defense grid was down for maintenance. They were defenseless. Panic erupted. Xylosian officials cried out in their native cliques, their composure gone. No, they scattered, seeking cover that did not exist. In the chaos, Lyra was jostled, her perfect poise shattered as she stumbled. A strong hand caught her arm, steadying her. It was the human soldier. His blue eyes were no longer calm, they were hard, scanning the viewport, assessing the incoming threat with a terrifying speed. He did not look at her, his focus absolute. He spoke, his voice a low rumble that cut through the pandemonium. "Many can those transports hold?" he asked, his tone utterly calm, as if inquiring about the weather. She stammered the answer. He gave another short nod, then released her arm. He reached up and touched a small device at his ear, speaking into it in his own guttural tongue. He was communicating with his ship, Around them, his fellow humans were moving. They were no longer clumsy or loud. They converged with a silent, frightening purpose, forming a protective circle around the scattered Xylosian dignitaries. Their bodies were positioned between the raiders and the diplomats. They had no weapons, nothing but their own forms. They stood as a living wall, their faces grim, their eyes on the sky. They were not afraid, they were waiting. The Cheel ships grew larger in the viewport, their weapons charging with an ominous, building whine. Iris' breath caught. She looked at the human beside her, this man whose name she did not know. He stood facing the oncoming doom, his posture relaxed, one hand in his pocket. He was a single, soft creature, standing in front of a storm. It was the most absurd and the most magnificent thing she had ever witnessed. He turned his head slightly, his gaze falling on her again. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was not a smile of happiness, but of reassurance, a silent message that carried across the screaming void. It said simply, "I am here." In that moment, the fear that had seized her heart since he first sat beside her vanished. It was replaced not by courage, but by a profound and wondering curiosity. What manner of being faced annihilation with a smile for a stranger? A new sound joined the alarm. A deep, resonant hum that vibrated in her bones. It came from above. Through the viewport, a human warship descended, vast and angular, its hull scarred and utilitarian. It was not beautiful like Xylosian craft. It was brutally functional, a weapon made manifest, slid silently between the palace and the raiders, a shield of metal and menace. The GL ships scattered like startled insects. They did not fire a single shot. They simply fled, their attack broken not by a display of force, but by the undeniable presence of it. The human ship did not pursue. It held its position, a silent guardian. The soldier finally took his hand from his pocket and let out a slow breath. The danger was over. He looked at Lyra, and this time his smile was warm, tired. "Sorry for the interruption," he said. In the aftermath, as the relief teams swarmed and the diplomats babbled, Lyra found herself still standing by the viewport. The human soldier remained, watching the nebula once more. The formal reception was forgotten. A new, raw reality had taken its place. She gathered her courage, the courage he had inadvertently given her, and spoke. "You would have stood there," she said, her voice soft but clear. "You would have stood there and died." He turned, his expression thoughtful. "Died? No, princess. We would have stood there and stopped them, with our hands if we had to." He said it without bravado, a simple statement of fact. It was then she understood. The histories did not exaggerate human ferocity. It simply misnamed it. It was not ferocity. It was a profound, illogical, and absolute refusal to yield. Stubborn, burning defiance that shone brightest in the face of oblivion. Why? She asked, the question holding the weight of her entire world's understanding. He looked at her, then at the other Xylosians, slowly emerging from their shock, at the fragile beauty of the palace, at the stars beyond. "Because you were sitting here," he said quietly. "Because someone had to." He gave her that same slow nod, turned, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of his own people. Lyra watched him go, her silver gown reflecting the light of a now peaceful nebula. The alien princess, who had been taught not to fear humanity, had finally learned the truth. It was not their strength or their weapons that were terrifying. It was the simple, unshakable promise in the eyes of one who would stand alone against the dark, simply because another soul was there. And that, she realized, was the most wonderful thing she had ever seen.